Have you ever looked back at the last year and thought, I've been really busy, but have I actually grown? Because those aren't always the same thing. We spend so much of our lives chasing the next goal, the next promotion, the next milestone, believing that once we get there, we'll somehow become a better version of ourselves. But personal growth doesn't usually happen in the big moments. It happens in the quiet choices nobody else sees, the conversations we handle differently, the habits we slowly let go of, the moments we choose to respond instead of react. So, today we're talking about what personal growth really looks like. Not the version we see on social media, but the one that happens in real life. Welcome to Healthy Mind, Healthy Life. I'm Shivam Vashisht, and this is where we have honest conversations about mental health, self awareness, and building a life that feels meaningful from the inside out. Joining me today is Ben Barbic, someone who's passionate about helping people understand that growth isn't about becoming someone new, it's about becoming more intentional with the life you're already living. Welcome to the show, Ben.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Let's start with this question. Ben, I think a lot of people imagine personal growth as this constant climb where every month we're supposed to be a better version of ourselves. But
hmm
real life doesn't really work that way, does it?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And what's the biggest misconception people have about what growth actually looks like?
Well, I think that it's a straight line. I think that growth is never a straight line. And so
Hmm.
the commitment is what I would say is a straight line. So as we veer to the left and the right, as life hits us, where we're focused on is, let's take the climb as an example. We're focused on, let's say, the mountaintop or the continuous climb even. But as it veers left and right and these obstacles come up, these are part of it. And we should embrace them and understand the value that they possess. Because a true A to B line is never what life gives us. So the expectation that things will arise that create challenges, in a way, I think it's good to embrace that.
Well, I think that is really reassuring. Maybe growth isn't measured by how much our life changes. Maybe it's measured by how differently we respond to the same situations. So many people genuinely want to change, but somehow they keep ending up in the same habits, the same
Mhm.
relationships, the same thought patterns. Why do you think that happens?
I think we have to get introspective and really look at what is it that we're arriving in that same situation, right? I think there's a lesson that can potentially be learned about why do I keep entering this same place? What is it? Is it comfortability? Is
Mhm.
comfortability bringing me to this place? And I think that if that's the case, then we need to be aware of our comfortability is maybe with something that's not good for us, right?
Right.
And that is self-destructive, if you will. So I think it's important to first understand when we're defaulting to habits that are hard-worn paths that no longer are relevant to us, or maybe never even were in the first place.
Right, right. Once someone recognizes they're stuck in one of those patterns, what's a simple first step that doesn't feel overwhelming?
Yeah, I think without getting specific on this, I think it's a small micro changes that you can make
Right.
within something. It's not we're not looking for massive change. That's actually the worst thing I think at the beginning, especially to do. And you just take small habits. So if you're talking about eating, well, maybe you take it very small and say, for breakfast, I'm going to now approach this in a certain way. And or I'm drinking too much soda. So okay, so I'm going from 10. I'm gonna take that down to something that I'm willing to commit to proceed forward. And I think that that's important because slowly as you adapt, you become ready for the next level of it. And so the same philosophy I take for life is, you don't start playing guitar and expect to play 3 hours at once because you'll get calluses, you'll bleed, and your fingers and your body
Right.
can't handle that. So you have to warm up to it, and embrace that pursuit. Um, and again, starting with the subtlest of moves that you're willing to do. I think it's important to also look within ourselves to what am I actually willing to commit to versus what I want to commit to? Because if it's too big, then 3 days in, you could run into a situation where like, oh, I don't want to do that on day three.
Right.
So, so allowing yourself the space to be as small as it needs to be to activate within the self.
Wow. Yeah. So the smallest steps, they make big differences is what people really need to know. And they just probably need to start. mm, They need to start from somewhere. And that's very, very, very rightly put. Uh, now, some let's bring this into everyday life. If someone is genuinely growing as a person, what does that actually look like on a normal Tuesday? Not during a life changing moment, just during an ordinary day.
Well, I think it instantly brings a little bit more satisfaction to your day. So
Okay.
when you're going through a day, let's say it's chaotic, let's say you have challenges within the day. But let's say you took 5 minutes to read in the morning,
Hmm.
and that reading now sticks with you through the day. So now on your typical Tuesday, your day has now been slightly enhanced by this new activity that gave you this new motivation to go through your day. Same could be said for exercise or something like that, or you could fill in that with a bunch of different categories. But it really, I think that's where the growth and improvements shine the best is in normal days, because that's where we have to make the decisions that we carry on for our life is in normal days. It's not special days, not perfect days, not the weekend where you're cleared out, but in your day-to-day activities, are you able to align with some of these concepts that can bring you forward and bring, I wouldn't even say joy to your day, and something, because joy in the sense of something you look forward to doing in every day. Allow yourself the space to have some element that you start to really enjoy and almost crave for your
Right.
day. Okay, I have a tough day, but I have that moment waiting for me, or I'm starting the day with that moment, or when I'm going to bed, I know in the morning I'm going to give myself 10 minutes to sit and read and drink coffee or meditate, or all of them. Let's say depending on the person, you can add in a whole stack of them that becomes something you look forward to.
That's what makes growth feel real. It's not about changing
Mhm.
who we are, it's about changing how we show up in the moments that quietly shape our lives. Very well put, for sure. Thank you so much, Ben, about that.
Absolutely.
For someone listening who's thinking, I know I need to grow, but I honestly don't know where to begin. Like you've already mentioned that, probably sitting and starting with a chapter or starting by reading a chapter every day is probably when you bring in a habit. So,
Mhm.
b- is that the only habit, or is there a certain habit or mindset you'd encourage them to start with?
Yeah, I think the fundamental building block of this is being curious
Uh huh.
what potential lies within,
Okay.
and the second that you think, okay, I wonder what potential is within me if I did 2 minutes of meditation every day. What could that give me? And then allowing yourself that, like I would say, almost giving yourself permission for that, and thinking, I want self care. I want to treat myself better because I deserve it. I think that really is what a lot of this is, oh no, I actually deserve to be treating myself better,
Hmm.
and looking at that. I think for me, that was one of the big eye-opening moments is when I thought I'm not treating myself the way that I should treat myself. I'm actually negatively, you know, applying all of these habits on a daily basis when in fact, why do I think I deserve that? So I think one of the key building blocks is when you think that I deserve this nurturing of the self through these activities, and so when that mind state shifts to that, I think it then allows multiple categories, and you can look for which one um, brings the most value to you. Like, which I would start with ones that actually really excite you in some way, right? Some it could, and I'm gonna just throw out a few that, because to me it's irrelevant which one of these you pick, because it's more about what that's gonna do and the snowball effect of that occurs in life when you do this.
Right.
And then you can stack on more because you start to really say, wow, I did stretching for 5 minutes in the morning and I felt great. Or I did
Wow.
meditation, or I read, or I wrote, or I journaled, or I wrote poems and poetry, or, and so any of these is where I would say to start. I think it needs to be customary to what people feel a little inner pull from. So maybe something from their past that they remembered and then they liked. Maybe they just explore, try a few and see which one aligns. But I think there has to be the internal motivation, I think, really stems from believing that we deserve these the growth mentality for our own lives, on a very internal level.
Certainly, certainly. Uh, People tend to, they definitely pick up an activity.
Mhm.
I've seen a lot of people around me as well. They would want to, they're looking at growth in a certain way. They want to start with something they probably have as well, but they tend to get frustrated way too
Mhm.
easily. You know,
Mhm.
now, when they get frustrated, they tend to give up on it
Mhm.
because, of course, they feel that I don't see any growth in whatever activities I'm moving on with.
Mhm.
What is it that specific person needs to do in order to keep moving on and understand that growth is probably a process? And
Yeah. Yeah,
what is
and I go ahead, sorry.
yeah, so I was just like, what is that process? Well, how does a person understand and probably try and keep that calmness while, of course, that person is frustrated? But what would you suggest to this person?
Yeah, I would say the growth is probably there, but it's more subtle than they're expecting.
Hmm.
I think that that's really the key. If you sit down and you lift a weight and you lift a weight for a week and then 2 weeks, it's very subtle, your strength gains, but your body is improving, and it might not be enough that you notice, but if you were to chart it from day 1 to day 30, it's there. The same application for meditation. You sit down and you try and
Right.
clear the mind and still the mind. You might think you're not progressing in a week or 2, but in actuality, it's just like a muscle. Your brain is working through it, getting better at it constantly. So I wouldn't be, too self-critical on that because the growth, I would say, the growth is there. I have yet to see where the growth isn't there if you continue with the pursuit, and it's just a reorganizing what your expectation is and how quickly that growth occurs. I think that's one of the key points here is it's not, I'm going to sit down for a minute and all of a sudden I'm in complete stillness for an hour, and that type of thing. It's like, let the process be what the process is, and it will develop. And if you have patience with it, you can make small tweaks along the way as well. But it's definitely, I'm kind of redundant in this, but it's reducing the expectation, I think is one of the value pieces of it.
I think we forget that every new skill feels uncomfortable before it feels natural. At first, everybody feels a bit uncomfortable. And why should personal growth be any different? To be honest,
That's right.
So now, no matter how much progress we make, there are always days when we slip back into old habits. We lose our patience, we procrastinate, we doubt ourselves. How do we stop those moments from convincing us that we have failed?
Yeah, well, to just know that that's natural. These moments are natural, and these moments of dips and sliding off path are part of everyone's experience with this. I don't think anyone goes without those moments, and it's not a failure. It's sometimes those moments actually give more motivation after they happen. So, let's say you did, let's just use meditation again. You did meditation practice for 3 weeks and you took 4 days off, and now you realize that, wow, that really did help me. And you now are, okay, now then I did it again. I'm now more motivated to keep that going. And so there's motivation in that. And you have to allow yourself that as well, because we never want to dip into an obsession thing. I think once something becomes an obsession is where it crosses the line. And so allowing that little bit of give is absolutely important.
Of course, for sure. Now, a lot of people are competitive in today's time, of course. Most of the decisions that everybody out there they're making in their life, they're based on, they need stats, they need, they need it to work out, and they need to assess it based on the
Hmm.
comparison and everything. So what they
Yeah.
generally do is they look at their past and they compare it to the present, and then they of
Hmm.
course procrastinate and think about the future. And sometimes they think that probably I was better off the way I was before, probably a lazy minded person, a person who who is chilling and life was all right, I don't need
Hmm.
this. Do you w- w- have a certain idea for this section of people, as to how they need to know that the past was actually n- is not the reality anymore, and they should actually stick to what they're doing right now, and they will land somewhere for sure? Any certain idea that you probably can share with our listeners, wherein they don't just go back to the past because it was easy, they've seen it already?
Right. Well, I think sometimes we look at our past through rose-colored glasses in some ways, and we forget
Right.
the other aspect of it.
Hmm.
It might have been easier, but it was also a lot harder in other ways. And so remembering the totality of it is important.
Right.
To not just say, okay, I wasn't having to work as hard, um, but to look at, I'm going to speak for myself because I don't ever want to assume anything with anyone, but the void of purpose in an easier life is what is significantly revealed for me. And so when we start accumulating things that give us more of that sense of purpose, I believe this is what us as humans uh, crave in
Hmm.
this world is that sense of purpose. And so I don't think easier is actually easier. I think easier is where forms of resentment or you know regret can potentially lurk. And so
Right.
um, that's the pieces that I think are critical to address when you're talking about a past that was maybe easier, because yes, it was in fact easier from a load of what I'm trying to accomplish, but it was much harder in a personal well-being perspective. So
Right.
that's the trade-off.
For sure. I'm sure that our listeners are getting inspired listening to everything that
Mm,
you've said so far. And,
mm,
it's something that people can reflect upon as and when they want to take a step ahead. And I personally believe, after listening to everything that you said, that what is the most important thing is for everybody to at least start from somewhere,
yeah.
because the beginning is what is of the utmost importance right now, and not to procrastinate. This may not go well, this may not go right, because of course you cannot, you can just not know what's going to happen in future. But thank you so much, Ben, for sharing all these insights with our listeners, and for joining us and sharing your perspective today with all of us. uh,
Pleasure.
Before we wrap up, where can our listeners connect with you and learn more about your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can go to my website, risingclimb.com. So
Hmm.
it's rise with an N, climb.com. You can go to Amazon or anywhere that sells books and buy my book, my audio book. And my music's available on all streaming services. So within that, you'll get a pretty good grasp of who I am, and through the podcast, obviously, you get another flavor of the packaging. So yeah, please do, and don't hesitate to reach out if you've read the book or the audiobook or listened to the music. I'd love to hear from people. It's why I do this is to connect with people on these topics.
Amazing, amazing. Right after the session, I'm definitely gonna hop on and listen to your music first, because I also happen to be a musician, so I love listening to exploring new music for sure. And then, for sure, going ahead and looking forward to reading your book as well. Once again, so glad that you became part of this. Before we end up, I would like to share something with our listeners. You don't have to become a completely different person overnight. You don't need to have your life perfectly figured out. Real growth is often invisible. It's choosing patience over anger, curiosity over certainty, progress over perfection. So this week, don't focus on changing your entire life. Just ask yourself one simple question: what's one thing I can do today that the old version of me wouldn't have done?
that one small choice might be the beginning of something much bigger than you realize. Thank you for joining us on Healthy Mind, Healthy Life. Until next time, take care of your mind and keep growing one step at a time.